That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette, and could talk about a couple of things today, including something I've not talked about all morning, but Jim, I was waiting for you. This CAQ race, of course, voting has now begun. The 20,000 CAQ members will get to choose their new leader, who becomes kind of like that game show premiere for a month or 2 or 3.
Well, yeah, but before we go any further, my friend, breaking development, I don't know what it is about the Coalition Avenir Québec and computers, but the online voting has crashed. There seems to be some technical problem. Voting has been suspended for the time being. They're hoping that they can get this figured out as quickly as possible. And you know what? It's another day at the office for these folks. But please don't let that take away from the fact that we are seeing, in fact, how can I put it? An interesting contest forming up here. An interesting contest between a group within the Coalition Avenir Québec, headed by Christine Fréchette, that wants you to pretend there's somebody else, and a group headed by Bernard Drainville that wants you to remember exactly who they are. Because, I mean, we're seeing this now more and more. Drainville is not, there is no quiet part for Bernard Drainville, whether it's immigration, whether it's identity, whether it's, the Charter of Values, you name it. He's the granddaddy of it all, and that is his battle flag. And I have to tell you, and I was talking about this yesterday as well. It's weird. I know the polls are saying it's in the bag for Madame Fréchette. I just have a strange feeling about this, Aaron. I don't think it's in the bag. I think maybe she'll win. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk. I have a sneaking suspicion that what we're looking at here isn't so much a leadership race as it is a referendum on the legacy of François Legault, the guy who spent 8 years unchallenged, pitting one section of Quebec society against another, telling Francophone Quebecers that they were constantly under threat. And he and his party were the only ones who could protect them and their language and their culture and their future. And I get the impression that Madame Fréchette has looked around and says, yeah, this ain't going to work too good because now we're one of the most unpopular governments in Quebec history. Maybe we should try and change the branding here. But you know what? I don't think it's going to work. I think you are seeing a kind of rush for the lifeboats. I mean, that's the more interesting part. The most interesting part about this entire vote, Aaron, is how many CAQ supporters are, in fact, I'm not going to vote. In fact, I'm going to give my support to somebody else, whether it's the PQ or the Liberals, the Conservatives. I just find it very, very interesting to look at this process, this leadership process, as anything more than another example or another element of the, how can I put it, the decomposition of the Coalition Avenir Québec. We are literally witnessing a political party be broken down into its component parts, be broken down into basically a collection of ideas, which it was at the very beginning when Legault founded it, but it's one that's going to disappear. I mean, the one thing we do know from the polls is that this party will never form the next government, and whether or not it still is around after that election is a matter of some debate. So on the one hand, yeah, it's fun to watch this exercise unfold. It's fun to chuckle over the fact that the online voting isn't working. But on the other hand, I think we're just looking at another, how can I put it, another chapter in the ultimate and inevitable demise of the Coalition Avenir Québec.
So, Jim, when I look at the two factions, if you will, here, right, Drainville on the one side and Simon Jolin Barrette, a couple of others coming out today to support him kind of last minute. This, to me, this is kind of an example of, tell me, your mission is to separate from Canada without separating from Canada. I mean, yeah, exactly. I've been complaining about this from day one with these guys. They call themselves Quebec nationalists, and that, my definition of that kind of Quebec nationalist is a separatist who's too chicken to hold a referendum. Always has been, because they know they'll be, every poll suggests, they'll get their butts kicked from here to Mars. But the idea is, use the same history of grievance, use the same kind of us against them kind of attitude. And to be fair, I think much to our shame, it worked. It worked for 8 years, Aaron. It wasn't, 8 years. It worked for about, 7.5 years. And then I guess Quebecers woke up. They realized that, we're not going anywhere with these guys. And in fact, these guys really can't do anything right. And they said, no, we're not going to vote for you. But now we're going to look at someone who's going to hold a referendum in their first term. That remains to be seen. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter who supports whom. As I've done it before, Aaron, I will do it again. This is basically a wrestling match to gain control, to win
to be able to put on the captain's hat that says Titanic on it, so that way you'll be in place in time for the next election. But the fact is, it is kind of weird to watch, because if we're going to make a movie, we might almost call this dead party walking, because this is where we are. This is and I find it amazing to try and figure out how the CAQ actually intends to govern, no matter who is in charge, between now and October, because everyone is looking at them in the past tense. Everyone is looking at them as a spent force, and it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for only the most rabid supporters of the CAQ will look at this as, there's still a chance. No, there's no chance, and we are seeing it play out in real time. And let's not allow ourselves to be distracted by this ongoing train wreck, be distracted from what's happening with the other parties as well, because there is some very, very interesting stuff happening, particularly with the Conservatives, led by a guy named Aaron Zane, who we've talked about him before. But Aaron, I'm telling you, we're going to be talking about this guy a lot more between now and October.
Just one last question, and I'll move on. When I mentioned Simon Jolin Barrette last minute throwing his hat in support of Bernard Drinville, that a bit of a, I don't want to say slap in the face, but a little odd, like a head scratcher, considering he is, Francois Legault's anointed child, and suddenly going with Bernard Drinville?
Well, some people are interpreting that as a kind of tacit endorsement from Legault for Drinville's candidacy. And remember, it was Legault who rumbled Drinville from his, God help us, talk radio job to come back into politics, and he's been there ever since. And the thing is, I really think that when we hear Bernard Drinville, point his finger at Christine Fréchette and say you can't be tentative, you have to be more decisive and whatever. This is almost like this is the kind of thing maybe Francois Legault might have been saying out loud if he decided to stay on as leader, but had been challenged for that leadership. Right. I really get the impression there's a lot less light between Bernard Drinville and Francois Legault than there is between Legault and Madame Fréchette.
I will ask, with respect to all the others, so you mentioned Eric Duhem. Does this sort of, if you want to call it a rift, depending on who wins this thing, this is beneficial, this is good news for the Conservatives or the Liberals, or not? I
think it is. It's good news for the Conservatives. And if I was Charles Mignard, head of the Quebec Liberal Party, I would not, in my war room, I would not have Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon's picture, head of the PQ, on my planning board. It would be Monsieur James' picture, because I think he is going to be a reason for a lot of sleepless nights between now and October for Quebec Liberals in general and for Charles Mignard in particular.
Okay, let me move on. Donald Trump, very much in the news. Tonight, of course, 8 p.m., we just talked to someone about this a minute ago. And I'm wondering, you wrote, I did not have Bond villain on my Trump bingo card. What do you mean here?
Well, listen, the way he's talking, the way he sounds like Blofeld, right? An entire civilization will cease to exist, blah, blah, blah. And none of it's original, by the way, whether it's bombing them back to the Stone Age. Some of our older listeners might recall a guy by the name of Curtis LeMay, who was a U.S. general, who actually used that expression to bomb North Vietnam back into the Stone Age if they didn't stand down. The idea, although I have yet to see the entire quote attributed to Trump, the idea of unleashing hell. Well, that's a line from Gladiator. It's like clearly someone's writing a script for him. But all that said, it was so funny because the former State Department official, as you were interviewing that guy in the last half hour, and I'm listening to you, what pops up on my feed? There's an alert. The Prime Minister of Pakistan is urging Donald Trump to wait 2 weeks. The diplomatic, process is proceeding very, very well. Please stand down. Because here's the thing. Quite apart from the fact you just told your adversary when you're going to strike or when to get ready, okay? I just don't think, from what I see in the so-called War Department of the United States, and I realize they're a very powerful military operation, but I get the impression that the idea that you're going to blow up you're going to blow up every bridge, and there are hundreds of thousands of them in Iran, and destroy the entire infrastructure between 8 p.m. and midnight. That's, I think, a guy, if we were in a bar and this guy was at the end of the bar saying that, we say, okay, and by the way, bartender, just change the channel because he's going off the deep end. But the fact is, this is what the President of the United States is saying. And the thing that scares me the most, Aaron, and I know a lot of our listeners are very concerned about this, what scares me the most is that nobody nobody in the United States structure of government, nobody in the United States at all, has put this guy into a straitjacket and taken him away. That's the part that scares me, because if Donald Trump was taken out of the equation tomorrow, I'm not really sure things would change that much.
By the way, Jim, you'll be interested to know, I don't know if you heard this clip, Brian, if you could find this. So it's interesting because our last guest suggested that maybe one of the mistakes made here by the Trump administration is thinking they could do in Iran what they did in Venezuela, right? And that would be pretty easy to go in, pluck the guy out. And obviously it hasn't happened. But if you didn't hear this, Jim, once the Iran situation perhaps, comes to a close, and I think, you mentioned this idea of a 2-week window. It seems to me that's a perfect opportunity for Donald Trump to say, no, things are going really, really well. They asked us for 2 weeks, and because they're really negotiating in good faith, we'll give them that, right? Here's what he said, though. I don't know where this came out of. This is Trump. Listen to this.
Now, with Venezuela, and just so you understand, the people of Venezuela, they say if I ran for president of Venezuela, I'm polling higher than anybody has ever polled in Venezuela. So after I'm finished with this, I can go to Venezuela. I will quickly learn Spanish. It won't take too long. I'm good at language. And I will go to Venezuela. I'm going to run for president. But we're very happy with the president-elect that we have right now.
All right, Jim, there you go. I just thought I'd throw that in there for you.
But here, okay, I understand what you've done and good work. The guy is in the middle of supposedly directing a war.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And tell me, anybody else. I'm sure as I speak to you right now, the fanboys are sending you texts saying, I don't understand, art of the deal, the genius, 12-dimensional chess.
Yeah.
No, the guy is freaking nuts, and nobody in the United States seems to have the courage or perhaps the inclination to take him away from the controls that could see this conflict go spinning wildly out of control.
We all have our fingers crossed, and I mean that sincerely. I think everybody's a little concerned and want to see this thing finally come to an end. Jim, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Canadian women are looking for more out of themselves, their businesses, their elected leaders, and the world around them.
And that's why we're thrilled to introduce the Honest Talk podcast.
I'm Jennifer Stewart.
And I'm Catherine Clark. And in this podcast, we interview Canada's most inspiring women.
Entrepreneurs, artists, athletes, politicians, and newsmakers, all at different stages of their journey.
So if you're looking to connect, then we hope you'll join us.
Listen to the Honest Talk podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you listen to your podcasts.